Todd and Rob in the afternoon.
Afternoon delight.
With Todd and Rob. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, Todd. We're back again with a new media show, and we have an exciting guest with us today, Mr. Dan Franks from Podcast Movement. But Todd, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm alive, and I actually got a few hours of sleep before the show today. So people are like, a few hours of sleep.
Wow, so you're all bright and shiny today, huh?
Yeah. It's 8 a.m. here where I'm at, and so I'm good and ready to rock and roll. So
Yeah, that's a 12-hour difference. It's 8 p.m. here, so right, yeah. And Dan, so how are you?
I'm good. It's good to be back. It's been a little bit. I was commenting to you all the technological advances we're all coming across these days. We were on Skype the last time, and we've progressed past that. So I do think the audio intro I think had debuted on the last time, so that's kind of dating the last time I joined you all.
Yeah, it is. I think we need a new one of those. But anyway, it's the one I have here programmed in my Rodecaster, so we need to update that. But it's a fun one, so it's a little retro for us. But Dan, it's an exciting time for you. You're on a countdown. What was it? 30 days or less to Podcast Movement in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. About a month from now, we'll be on the backside of it. So yeah, under 30 days to go to Podcast Movement, and like at every year at this point out from the event, 3.5 weeks out, it's the whole team's hair is on fire, mostly in good ways, and just kind of coming down the home stretch.
Yeah. There's a lot of activity on your website as well. So I wanted to pull that up on the screen too. And so actually 25 days, 15 hours and 52 minutes.
But who's counting, right? Exactly.
Right. No, nobody's counting. It's in August 19th through the 22nd in Washington, D.C. So it's, I guess Washington, D.C. is going to be officially the capital of podcasting. So it's one thing that podcasting hasn't had is a capital of podcasting.
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone kind of confuses the AL, the OL, like what's the right use of capital. I can assure you I've done plenty of research to make sure that it's the right spelling for all our linguists out there. But yeah, excited to be in DC. The last time we were in the Northeast was 2018 for Philadelphia Podcast Movement.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever that is, 8 years ago or so, 7 or 8 years ago. It's the last time we were up there, and been all around the country, and excited to be back up in the Northeast. It's got its own kind of vibe, and from an event side, its own registration patterns and its own type of attendees. A lot more people from New York are going to come to an event in DC than they are in LA, and so yeah, one of the reasons we like traveling around is not only is every event different, every venue different, every city different, but the attendee base is a little different based on where you're at in the country. So all fun things that keep us on our toes.
So is there anything different about the event, that's related to being in Washington, D.C.? Is there anything, involved with the government or anything like that involved in the conference at all?
Well, one of the interesting things is it's the same week as the Democratic National Convention. So in terms of any presence from your more traditional, what would you call it, like political or news commentators that might be based in DC, or that some of the networks might want to send out for that event, they'll be in, I guess, in Chicago for the National Convention. But in terms of some of your more local, broadcast networks and things like that, NPR is one of the bigger ones that's headquartered in Washington, D.C. So they'll have a big presence. We just announced yesterday that they're coordinating a keynote featuring Ira Glass from This American Life, and Rachel Martin, who is kind of a long-time traditional broadcaster for the NPR network, and she's got a new podcast. So they'll be on stage together. So from a kind of what's happening locally standpoint, NPR having a big presence is kind of the biggest thing. But obviously, lots of media and lots of things are headquartered in DC that maybe otherwise wouldn't be there. I've noticed, not necessarily from the speaker standpoint, but from the attendee standpoint, we've had a lot of governmental organizations buying tickets for their staff to go. So, a lot of them have internal podcasts that they're using to communicate internally with their teams, and a lot of them do have public podcasts that kind of
Mhm.
put out news about their different segments of the government. So definitely a lot of local registrations as far as that goes. It's kind of interesting to see as those registrations come across the platform, seeing different companies that we otherwise wouldn't see.
Yeah, Todd, go ahead if you have something to ask.
Yeah, I dropped off for a minute, so the audio quit, so I missed what Dan had said. I think from our perspective, it's going to be interesting because I think this is the first time in quite a while there's been a truly East Coast show, and we're kind of laughing about it internally that it's going to be one of our shortest flight days to get to the event. And where we can actually get there in a direct flight. So, I think from that standpoint, we're excited, and it's good to see that you're getting those types of registrations from the local areas. Are you seeing more East Coast registrations, or how overall are you seeing more East Coast registrations? Or are you seeing a good mix?
Yeah, we're seeing a good mix, and that's one of the things I mentioned was the last time was 2018. We were in the Northeast on the East Coast in Philadelphia, and one of the things that happened that year was a whole lot of super late registrations, and most of them being from like your New York metro. So I was talking earlier about kind of the different everything. The city, the location always has different things about it, and one of the things that we learned about the Northeast was a lot of people from New York are okay buying a ticket late and taking the train down or driving down or whatever. That happened in Philadelphia. And we're seeing that a lot too. A lot of people from New York that we're talking to, they're like, oh yeah, I can't wait to come. We're like, we haven't bought your ticket yet. And they're like, yeah, I'll get to that. I don't have to buy a plane ticket kind of thing. So I'm still going to buy my ticket. So we are seeing a lot of kind of New York people, I would say, that are registering late. But yeah, a lot of DC, that's what I was saying. We see a lot of like .gov email addresses coming through in the registrations that I know we've not had those people at the event before. So definitely a lot of local people. And then, of course, our usual travel in from what looks to be, once again, all 50 states coming in, and
Right.
lots of international travel as well. Easier to get from the UK and that kind of is part of the world to the East Coast than our West Coast events. So we definitely see people kind of taking advantage of that proximity as well.
I haven't been paying a lot of attention to the I know you mentioned the NPR having a keynote. I haven't been paying real close attention to your keynote list, but who have you got stacked up right now for keynotes?
Yeah, so one of the models we've over the past few events taken for those keynotes is to pair up some sort of data research presentation with more of a creator or conversation type of thing, so that every keynote block will have 2 to 3 sessions, and that we kind of scratch the itch of having some data and research involved, hopefully new data and research that comes out, followed by a little bit more what I would call maybe entertaining or kind of not so data rich presentation. So that's happening again this year. So excuse me, on our what I'll call our data research side of things, we've got Gabriel Soto from Edison Research. Edison's given keynotes for close to 10 years now. They've got a cool one where they've partnered with Audio Chuck Network, which is best known for the Crime Junkies podcast. They've partnered with them to do a deep dive and research into listeners of the true crime genre, which we all know is a big one. And so they're presenting the data that they've learned from listener behavior of true crime podcasts, and then kind of extrapolating that how other podcasters outside of that genre can maybe use that information and put it into action. So that's one. We've got Tom Webster, formerly of Edison, now with Sounds Profitable. For the second year in a row, he's giving what he calls the podcast landscape presentation. So he's got a whole lot of data and research to present that day. And then we've got one with Steve Goldstein, who's from Amplify Media, and he's partnering with Westwood One Cumulus on some research they've done about how audio promos can best be used in podcasts. So, a lot of people hear, do promo swaps or, buy ads on other podcasts that are similar to yours or that kind of thing. So they've done some research on how to effectively use audio promos. So those are our three what I'll call research pillars that are taking place on stage. And then we've announced, we've announced 2 of the 4 other ones that are kind of more, what I'll call a little bit more entertaining, but also educational. The first one you see on the screen, Eric Silver and Amanda McLaughlin. They're from a company called Multitude Productions. They're really interesting. They've been around for 10 years, and they're a fully independent podcast production company that is based out of New York. And they've got a team of basically producers that produce a whole bunch of independent shows. And they've kind of done what a lot of podcasters that attend Podcast Movement want to do, which is make podcasting their full-time thing. But they've done it, never taken outside money, never, flirted with the acquisition offers that a lot of studios that are kind of their size have taken. So they're going to kind of give that, which I'll go back on that same topic. A lot of networks and studios that have been acquired have since been sunset or laid off or wiped out completely. And they basically, his presentation is like, hey, there's a reason why we didn't take this money or this strategy 5 years ago when everyone else was, and we're still here to talk about it. And we've kind of thrived through this time period. So kind of a, informational, educational, but also motivational message that will really resonate with a lot of our creator attendees. And then the one we talked about with Ira Glass and Rachel Martin, and they're going to do what essentially is a live version of Rachel Martin's podcast on stage, which it's like an interview-based game show. So they're going to do that. So that'll be fun. And then we've got 2 more final keynote main stage sessions that we're announcing next week. And then, of course, our usual really strong lineup of breakout sessions, panels happening throughout the day. So every day starts with a keynote, and then the rest of the day is those breakout sessions and panels that are split up between different track stages based on their topic.
With the amount of mania going on over AI, I'm sure you were inundated with AI speaking proposals. Even us, we focused quite a bit of time this year in developing AI solutions for Blueberry. What are you seeing on that front? Of anyone is in the AI industry that is, in other words, do anyone speaking on AI that is not part of the podcasting community? In other words, an outside voice, or most of the folks that are coming in speaking about AI already in the industry?
Yeah. So first I'll talk about the AI kind of submissions like you hinted at. So going into the event, what we had initially laid out was kind of our 3 core tracks. One of the core track was going to be like podcaster creator, like kind of your traditional how to tell good stories and everything that's just, podcaster interview skills. One of them, and that one still exists. One of them that's industry. So that's like not for the creators themselves, but for the business side of podcasting. That's always been a successful one. That one still exists. The middle one that kind of sits between those two was originally meant to be focused on video only, because, a year and a half ago when we were putting these kind of structures together, like it was all about video. You got to do video. You got to have a video component, which I think that's still kind of a message that people are getting and thinking about. But we got so many submissions that were AI-based submissions, and not like for video, not like we didn't get any submissions for video, but a whole lot less interest in like speaking about video podcast, but so much interest in AI and other things that were like kind of techie, kind of like AI. People sometimes call it AI when it's not really AI. It's just kind of technological advancements in podcasting and audio and video, that we turned that middle track from straight video to what we more call emerging trends. So it's video, but it's also including AI and some other sessions that kind of fit into emerging tech, emerging trends. So kind of, to answer before answering your specific question, that was like a reformat that we had to do with that specific track, just because there was so much interest in speaking about and teaching about, and we have to, deduce that that's also interest in learning about AI. In terms of like who is actually speaking on AI, I'd say it's mostly people that are already in the podcast space, either people that are, representing audio tech companies that are in AI, like Descript. Descript is obviously one of the bigger AI platforms with AI, and probably one of the first people to really implement what we're now calling AI into their transcriptions and their audio software. So like someone like them would definitely be there. Actually, Andrew Mason, who is who was one of the founders of Groupon, and then went on after he sold Groupon to found Descript. He's actually going to be there on a panel on that track. So that's kind of a cool thing. But yeah, I would say most people that are speaking about AI are people that are active in the audio, podcast, video, AI field already, not necessarily anyone else from like an open AI or something like that.
Right, right. And we just, what's kind of interesting is our read on podcasters wanting AI is they're still a little bit leery. They're still cautious. And I think that's actually probably a good theme for them to be at this point, is to be a little cautious. The thing that I'm, obviously concerned about is AI generated content that is pure AI generated content, not something that helps you with questions for a guest or helps you with topics or helps you with getting talking points together. I think that all those use cases are very acceptable, but I think my concern really is in the long run, this barrage of written AI content that's already come out, because we're kind of in this legal gray zone right now in that, if you're creating AI pure content, there's copyright issues in that the content can't be copyrighted because it's generated by AI. So I think over time, we'll see what develops. But, I have ongoing concerns, obviously, people using AI to, and I think I'm take a real hardcore stance on this, is replacing words. Do you have to disclose that when you start, editing your audio and replacing words, or even purely generating with a voice clone? Should you disclose that? And I think that's a discussion point that has not at all been addressed or brought up. So I hope some folks are going to be talking about some of those legal ramifications of using AI in your production as well.
Yeah, one of the cool things that we started last year, or we first debuted last year in Denver at Podcast Movement 2023, was a concept called Brain Dates. So Brain Dates is this third-party company that comes to events and basically curates this. It's a combination of, I consider it more networking, they consider it more content. That's kind of where like teaching and networking come together. So the idea is there's this Brain Date marketplace that all attendees have access to. And an attendee can basically offer themselves up as a small group discussion leader on a topic that they are an expert in. And then up to, I think, 7 or 8 attendees can then sign up to participate in that conversation.
Nice.
And you can also like request topics. So you can say like, hey, I'm not an expert in AI legal, but I really want to talk to somebody who is. So you can basically put that up there. And then someone like a Gordon Firemark or a Lindsey Bowen or some of these attorneys that are in our space can sign up to join those conversations or be invited to kind of lead those conversations. And like I said, it's just a small group that's intended for, a 30-minute discussion on a very specific topic. And last year was the first year we put it out there, and it was an overwhelming success. So we're bringing that third party back to do that again this year. And that's the type of topic that, most people want to just learn about the AI, the tools. How do I make my life easier? How do I produce my show easier? How do I produce more content or whatever? So maybe like legal AI is not going to fill a room of 100 seats, but maybe it can get, 10 or 20 people that want to come together and discuss it in a small group and like really have an interactive discussion. So that's where Brain Dates really comes in handy. So, that's kind of my way to shoehorn in the Brain Dates concept, but it's because those conversations are like happening in that Brain Date area of the event.
Nice.
So did you see a growth in the numbers of companies, let's say, that have an exhibition booth or that are participating in there that have a linkage to AI? Has that grown for you, or is it the existing companies that are adding AI mainly?
Yeah, both. Our show has fluctuated with the industry over the past several years. So, 2021, 2022, there was all these new companies coming in. And then just like with the industry, with companies going under or getting acquired or just kind of having fire sales, a lot of those companies that were there with us 4 years ago aren't in existence anymore, and new companies have come in. So we've seen like this churn, just like the industry has. We've seen it at the event as well, especially when it comes to exhibitors, because when a new company starts, the first thing they often do is buy a booth and try to kind of get the word out there. But this year we are seeing quite a few, what I would call AI companies that's what their focus is. A lot of the companies that do, kind of turning your content into marketing materials. I just think that's because that's a need that we always see podcasters want, is how do I grow my show? How do I spread word about my show and not necessarily spend more time marketing my show than I do recording and editing my show? So that's one of the fields that we see a lot of, companies coming out and exhibiting their services, which is that AI kind of marketing software. But obviously, like your Descript, and there's several other tools like that goes towards more what Todd was talking about, which is that editing of your shows using AI, taking out filler words. That's, I think, okay. If you're the host and you want to change your own words through AI, I think that's okay. But when you have guests on, or you're taking audio clips, or you're the worst, having, somebody that's not on your show and using completely fake, quotes from them or something. So anyways, the long story short, we've got tools that could potentially kind of facilitate some of those things as well. And then we can have those conversations about if it's right or wrong. But then also, like Todd said at the very beginning, a lot of existing companies that have been in the space for a long time, kind of bolting on AI features or completely different AI products to their existing product. That's definitely something that we're seeing a lot of as well. So AI, I think, is the big thing happening this year, not only on stage, but just in what exhibitors are showing off.
It's interesting because it's pretty obvious. There were some companies that had a head start on, putting platforms together. And when, specifically when we approached this, I said, listen, let's just build it into the tool so that someone doesn't need a third party. So someone doesn't have to go out and spend another $39.95 a month for their show. And because I hate to say it, I don't want to be, I think when you're a one-trick pony, you even the AI offering that we've offered, even then, that has it's encompassed as part of a bigger package. So there's more things that people can get access to besides just the AI tools. So I'm worried about some of these AI companies. As a matter of fact, we had one that we signed a pretty significant contract with that we were using, and they didn't survive. We got 9 months out of our 12-month contract before they went upside down. So I think that with the space moving as fast as it is, it's probably pretty smart right now for people to do month to month on any type of subscription model that they're picking on any company out there, just because, as you said, companies that were there 4 years ago or 3 years ago are not apt to show.
Or 2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and the survivability rate, unless you were real early and got a head start, it's really hard to break out in some of the stuff. And, so I think too, the message we got from our users was basically, yeah, we want this tool internal, so that's part of our regular production flow. Anyway, I guess the advantage that Descript has is they had such a huge head start on everyone. They're well known now, but now they've got some competition from Adobe and a few other offerings out there. So all those companies are playing catch-up mode to them, but I'm sure a company like Adobe is going to do well in catching up. But this stuff takes time. So, and of course, Descript made a, amazing acquisition of the other platform. That was probably the smartest,
right?
Yeah, that was probably the smartest acquisition that I saw in the space in many, many years. So, I think Descript is well positioned and well loved. Well, matter of fact, one of the podcasts that I listen to that is about AI, they use Descript for editing, and they're just, they're giving them accolades left and right on their show, and they're just a podcaster. So, Descript has definitely got a head start. But what are some other emerging stuff that you've seen people submitting submissions for that end up being, that's a cool topic?
There's I would say not to put down any of the submissions, but I would say the ones that are most unique are going to be those ones that are either AI, and like some of those presentations aren't like, hey, AI is great, like here's how to use AI. Some of them are kind of like counter arguments to AI.
No.
Yeah, so those are good. But yeah, I would say like there's not necessarily anything like super groundbreaking. Several years ago, there was a big rush of presentations that had to do with like, every brand needs a podcast, so branded podcast, branded podcast, this, that. We've definitely seen a step back in that, and which I think is good, because I think not every brand needs a podcast. I think some brands can do really well with them, but so that was like a big push. So I would say like stuff like that we've seen a big pushes in the past, that we're not seeing big pushes currently. But I mean, the same things that we always, try to aim for and try to bring to the education, growing your show. That's obviously the number one question that every podcaster wants to know. So we have several growing your shows. Different social media channels have changed. So there's, more, or kind of 5 years ago would have been how to grow your show on Facebook. And now it's, TikToks and stuff like that. So those sessions all evolve. Monetization. I would say there's still interest both in the attendee standpoint as well as the speaker standpoint, and more, membership models, and in your listeners kind of paying, which I know this show's kind of been an advocate for years, of probably for its whole existence, of like, listener supported versus like just the only way to make money is to go out and sell ads.
Right.
So I think that's a big thing. We also in the past few years had a lot of like, pushing of dynamic ad insertions, programmatic, like, hey, if you have 5 listeners, you can make money. And luckily we've seen a lot less of that. I don't know if some of those platforms have realized like they're not making any money off those customers either, or what. But from a creator standpoint, it's obvious to me, it's very valuable to be like, hey, no, you don't, not everyone, just because you can, click a checkbox and get, a mid-roll inserted randomly into your show and make 5 cents. Like, that doesn't mean you need to do it.
Right.
So we've seen kind of some of those presentations and proposals scale back on that topic a little bit. So yeah, like I said, it's interesting. It's more what we're not seeing as much of than we are like new things we're seeing, at least this year.
One thing that we see on our site on premium is we had this, we keep track of feature requests. And premium. We're hearing this. We're marking up on the on the ticker, all the shows that wanted a premium podcast. They wanted to be able to do ad free, or they wanted to, whatever the model was, that they were going to do an extra episode. I'm just based upon our experience. A lot of people say they want premium, but when it comes to executing premium, it's a much smaller number. We did not hit our KPI on the number of new customers that launch premium shows. And it's the only product that I've launched probably in the past 2 years that did not hit a KPI goal on what we thought was going to be the number of new customers and that projection. So I'm always now, when I'm talking to a podcaster and they say, well, I'm going to do premium. I'm like, okay, so do you understand what that really is involved in having this ground truth discussion? So it's going to be curious to see then what people are saying at the event when it comes to doing premium or even Apple subscriptions, which, we were one of the early ones that integrated with Apple, and Apple, we have a meeting with them on a periodic basis to look at the numbers. And I think they expected, honestly, I think they expected more as well. A little behind baseball discussion there that, I haven't talked about before, but I think that a lot of people say they want premium, but when it comes time to execute, they don't. So going back to the value for value model, I think we see a much bigger uptick in that, multitudes more of people. I think last time I checked, we probably about $30,000 in earnings out of the podcasting 2.0 Satoshi streaming stuff. So, that's a much bigger number than what people have made in premium podcasting. So I think there's some having these discussions about not alternative. We shouldn't even say that word anymore about value for
Just
value.
one of the options, right? One of the
One of the
directions you can go,
Yeah.
not an alternative direction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the options. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's the whole premium side has been kind of bifurcated into separate solutions, right? So you've got Spotify and you've got Apple, and then you can have your own kind of system that runs on your own website. So you're basically kind of splintering your audience across all these different platforms on the same concept. So we haven't really been able to integrate that much. I know Spotify started out trying to support third-party kind of paid premium podcasts, but I don't know that they're doing it anymore. I'm not sure what the update on that is, but
But if you look at the shows at a wide spectrum, and let's break them into averages, how many shows that have under 100 listeners, how many shows have 1,000, how many shows have made it to 5 and 10, those percentages get smaller as you move up. So the number of shows that have enough viability to do premium is actually in the end relatively small, maybe 15 to 20% that probably have enough numbers of listeners to make a go of it that would make it worthwhile. And, again, it's a big commitment. You say, okay, I'm going to give you an ad-free version of my show and you subscribe to it. What if you only get 10 people to subscribe? Then you do that extra work.
Well, and like you said, like you have to have an ad-supported show to then have a non-ad-supported version of your show.
That's
so
right,
like that's
right.
also in a big piece of it when you're talking about
Right.
like small shows looking at the premium model.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about something that we kind of touched on early in the conversation was around video. I know that's a highly contentious topic in the podcasting space right now about, the YouTube entry. And then here today in Pod News, we saw some mention by Spotify's CEO about their embrace of video and what they term video podcasts on their platform. So we're seeing this kind of YouTube, and then there's this option of RSS-based video podcasting, and then what we're seeing on Spotify. Dan, what's your observation just on the kind of feeling on the ground about how the industry is doing on this? Because we see research coming out pushing us towards video, and on the same time, there's a lot of kind of ground thought that maybe it's not always a good use of time on the part of podcasters.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of directions to go with that. One of the on the ground observations I see when we do our meetups around the country, I've done some local meetups here in Dallas, as well as we go on different meetup tours. We get a lot of people that come to those. We run ads on Facebook and the local groups and stuff like that. And people come to this podcast meetup and they show up. We're like, oh, what's your show? What's your podcast? And it's like a YouTube show. There's no RSS feed. There's no Spotify. There's no Apple Podcasts. It is a straight YouTube show that they are with themselves and with their friends. They're calling it a podcast. So to me, like from the creator side, there's this whole segment of the industry where they don't speak our language. They don't know what it is we're talking about. And then when, we get up there and talk about anything, RSS feeds, anything that we just consider part of our vernacular, it's foreign language to them. So I think like the same way that we're looking at like, hey, how, should we have video? What's that video conversation for audio first podcasters? There's the same, there's the whole flip side of it. It's like video only people that how do we kind of usher them in? If they come to a podcast movement event, like what's the entry point for them? So then they figure out like, hey, there's a whole lot more to this than my YouTube show essentially. So that's it. Yeah.
I'm curious because this has been my hypothesis for a while. How do they leave that event? Are they kind of like, oh, holy shit? Or are they, where do they leave and having been exposed to the non-YouTube side, I guess the best word.
So two very different reactions. One is like almost like doing an audio version of this would be like going backwards. Like there's a certain subset which like, wait, why would I do that? Like I've already progressed past that. Why would I then go back to that? And and that's usually honestly like a younger demographic that they consume all of their content on YouTube, on TikTok, whatever. So like, because they've not gotten the desk job where they listen to a show, or they're not commuting where you have to listen to something. They haven't like quite experienced the value of audio from a consumer side. From the creator side, like it's going the wrong direction. But then we have our whole other people that like are open to it, and they're like, oh wow, like I don't really have to do anything else. Like I'm already making this video that the audio is essentially the product anyways. So now I just have to figure out how to get that in front of a lot more people that could potentially consume my content. So we see just the both of those reactions, I would say, equally.
Yeah, and this was our approach to doing Vid2Pod. And I'll say we have met our KPIs on that product. I guess I'll just leave it at that. I think what it is if they're going to the trouble of doing a YouTube channel, making it very, very easy, in which Podbean has done it as well. They've introduced a version of a Vid2Pod, making it very, very simple for them to say, okay, let me just do a couple of settings, and then boom, we'll do the rest of the lifting for you. I think is pretty appealing for those that say, why should I do this extra work and go backwards? And I think, if someone stops by the booth, we'll have a pretty good sales pitch for them. So do you think you're going to have a good contingency of YouTube creators at the show, or have you been able to define that group?
Yeah, it's a little harder to define just because they consider themselves podcasters. So any like written survey, they're going to, unless we're specifically like audio, video, which that's probably the next step we need to do. But in, those entry form questions, like they're considering themselves an active podcaster. But yeah, just based on anecdotally, like seeing those people show up to our other events, I think that will be a pretty big contingent. And then I guess kind of the other part of the question is like, how we're seeing things with like people that are audio first, those people that are traditional podcasters and thinking about adding video, seeing data like you mentioned, I think Rob, you mentioned in Pod News today with Spotify saying they're kind of seeing that video, not necessarily like top of how people are consuming the podcast, but like top of discovery for podcasts. So the way I interpreted it was a lot of people are using the video feature, discovering new shows, and then like kind of converting almost to audio listeners of those shows, but the video portion is like the entry point. I see a lot of that, and even like anecdotally myself, if I'm going around YouTube looking at videos on a topic, and then you can usually tell like, hey, this is probably just a video version of an audio podcast. I'll very often like discover new shows that way, and then they'll end up in my podcast player, and I never watch the videos again. But that's kind of the biggest thing I see right now is not just, hey, do I need to make video because that's going to grow my audience, or more people are going to watch, the video than audio eventually. I just kind of see as podcasters are always looking for new ways to get discovered and to grow their audience. If nothing else, it being a discovery mechanism could be, the selling point.
I think the argument, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, it just seems like that, just from my own experience over the last year of doing a YouTube show as well as having it be a podcast, is that I think a lot of content creators, because of what YouTube has done, and then also increasingly what we're seeing Spotify do by raising the attention and the profile of the video that they're doing, is that they're kind of trying to compete with YouTube. And so I think a lot of younger creators are seeing that, and they're starting to kind of conflate video with podcasting more. And also, those platforms are using the term podcast. So I think I think that there is one side of the industry that thinks that those platforms are confusing podcasters and giving them not necessarily the correct impression about what podcasting is. But then there's the reality of it. And that's the reality that those people are seeing what they're seeing, and they think that that's normal, right? And to accept the fact, and there's also creators that think of themselves primarily as video creators, like you were just talking about, Dan, is that I do think that there's a division here of creators that think of themselves primarily as video creators, and then there's other ones that think of themselves as primarily audio creators. And both of those kind of divisions start to think about the other side, right? But when they do, oftentimes it's secondary, right? So if you think of yourself primarily as a video creator, adding audio is like thought of as like maybe some, it's additional work, right? Or it's not as high of a priority. So whenever they promote their show, they're primarily promoting the video side. So it's an interesting kind of contrast of what's happening in that area right now and how they're converging on each other, but at the same time, there's a lot of friction between them. Is there any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll go ahead, Dan, and I've got a follow-up.
No, I was just going to say, I think it also probably has to do with the level of success you're seeing on your primary platform.
Right.
If you're seeing great success on video, then like the idea of maybe starting over on audio or trying to grow into that
Is less important, right?
Is less important. Or if you try it and don't see immediate success, you're like, wait, I've got, all these subscribers on YouTube and like audio is not picking up, like forget about it. So I think like if you maybe aren't having success on your primary platform, then it's more appealing to kind of branch off and see like, because you haven't got a primary platform at that point if you've not got a big, a decent size audience on either one. So I think probably that level of success, kind of where your starting point is when you think about the other, side of it, plays a lot of the role.
But I think the thing I worry about, and we've talked about it here a dozen times already on the show, is this. Basically the narrative is that if you don't have a video podcast right now, you're screwed. And that's kind of the narrative. And, that's the impression. You have to have a video podcast. And a lot of those studies and stuff, who's paying for them, where's the PR originating? Because as we go through and again, as we look down the stack, yeah, there is a small segment of shows on YouTube that are very, very successful. I mean, they're knocking it out of the ballpark, that are calling themselves podcasts with tens of thousands of views. And then you get down below 200-300, and then it's minimal, very, very minimal. And I don't know if it's additive and or if it's worth the creator's time to have invested this stuff. I think tools like StreamYard make it easier to do video. And so that's part of the questions we're asking podcasters now is, if you are considering video, do you want to do live or you do want to do pre-recorded? I think live makes it, I think some people are hesitant to go live. Well, at the same time, it's definitely easier. Then again, you've got those that are just as hardcore editors in video as they are in audio. And if you do something on YouTube live and then go back and edit, then you really kind of lose out because there's no replace mechanism in YouTube. You can't replace the media. You basically have to publish a new episode, and your count goes back to zero. While your counts you got while you're listening live count, it can give this perception that you're not having a lot of success and spending a lot of time. So this is the thing I worry about is someone that isn't 100% up to speed on what's happening and the challenges of building a big show, audio or video. Will have this idea of, well, I'm going to find success in video and I need to do that. And the next thing they know, they're discouraged and quit earlier just because, nothing's working for them. Instead of
right, or you tried to do too much and to do too much and then didn't make it, put enough time into what the focus should be on. Yeah.
So, so for our standpoint, we're just trying to, we've been doing video on this show for 12 years. So, we're not ones to say you shouldn't do video, but, I think we're going to really look at hard and making it easier for podcasters to do a true video podcast. But at the same time, Apple needs to help us and apps need to help us so that Spotify isn't the only one talking about this narrative of having video in the platform. If Apple continues to make video a third-class citizen in the Apple Podcast app, there's not going to be incentive for podcasters to do RSS-based video podcasts.
Yeah, they depreciated it quite a few years ago. And it's not easy to find a video podcast in the Apple ecosystem right now.
Even if you find a video podcast, until you click on you can start it. It looks like it's audio until you click on the player.
Yeah, you have to click twice, right?
You have to click twice. And most people are not going to click twice.
That's
so, they've made an absolute third-party citizen, whereas YouTube and Spotify, I'm sure what they're doing, to be quite frank with you, I'm sure Spotify surfacing video first in search results.
Oh, yeah.
So
They're a
they've
video platform. Right.
Yeah, they made it a first class citizen. So of course, if you're sourcing the video version of a show,
Right.
and making the audio the bastard child on the platform, yeah, of course they're going to say they're having great success with video. So
It's like a choose your own adventure, right? Like they
Yeah.
basically can dictate what their stats are going to show.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, they can.
So, and then we've heard for years that Spotify was going to be the savior and pay us money. Well, ha ha ha. The joke is on. Yeah, the partners and stuff.
Yeah.
They're earning revenue, but for the 90% of podcasters on Spotify, they're being treated worse than musicians.
Yeah.
At
There's
least
no
Snoop
money
Dogg-
coming back. Right.
At least Snoop Dogg, when he gets 1 billion views, he gets
Yeah.
$20,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
literally, I think that's what his check was. I have to go back and look, but
So,
go ahead.
So since we have Dan here, I wanted to go back to podcast movement a little bit and kind of fill in all of the other details here. So I wanted to talk about where the event's being held. So Dan, why don't you tell us all about it? It's in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, so technically it's in Maryland.
In Maryland. Okay.
The only people that really push back on that are the people that live in DC, that they're like, it's not real DC. But most people that work and commute to DC don't live in DC. So a lot of people from Maryland are like, oh, that's great. It's before I get to DC. But what I say is you sit in the meeting rooms or in the hotel lobby, and you can look out the window and see the monuments. So to me, that's DC proper, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Quick access to downtown. Highly recommend anyone who's coming in go for the night tour of the monuments. That's the best thing I've done in DC. I've done it several times. You go down and you can just walk. You can start at the like by the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial, and you can basically walk all the way down to the Capitol building and the White House. All of that. It's all lit up. It's all open to the public. They have security there, so it's super safe. But the self-guided night tour of all the monuments, really cool. Something you should do when you're in DC. And the venue is right on. It's on National Harbor, so that picture, if you're on the video version, you can see the water. Really cool, just kind of setting for the event. You look out the expo windows, and you'll be looking at the water and kind of looking across the river or the bay or whatever it is. So that's really cool. It's National Harbor is really cool. I call it. It's almost like a Disneyland city that was built just on an empty plot of land that happens to be an island. So anyone who's been to our past events at Gaylord's know that Gaylord's what they like to do with their hotels is basically put you on an island and make it really difficult for you to get off property. So they're usually never close to the city that they're a suburb of. They usually have lots of acreage all around, so you can't walk to a restaurant. Luckily, this hotel was not a Gaylord to start. Gaylord took it over. So for that reason, it's very walkable. It's the most walkable Gaylord property we've ever been at. In this little like Disneyland of restaurants and shops and kind of little neighborhood, just steps outside the hotel. So really good for people who maybe have had problems getting lunch or dinner or breakfast and don't want to stay in the hotel to do that. Can walk right out. But yeah, just kind of a cool town. We've actually every year when we try to decide, we have to book the cities 3 or 4 years in advance just to secure the venues of the size we need. And DC has been a city that we've site visited properties in several times. Always kind of wanted to find a fit there, and we were able to do that. So just super excited to be headed there.
Yeah, I stayed at that same hotel and did a Nielsen conference a few years back. So it's a gorgeous hotel. And the other thing that's common about the Gaylords is that oftentimes they have large atriums that are part of it. And this one also, from the photograph, has a large kind of glass ceiling and
it
kind
does
of more open experience, right?
It does. Anyone who was with us last year, fun thing that happened. So the Gaylord Rockies in Denver, which is their newest Gaylord property, they're opening one in San Diego in a few years that we'll be at. But as of now, the newest active one is Gaylord Rockies in the Denver area. And when we picked out the venue, we site visited, signed the contract, this big, beautiful atrium. And then about a month before the event, they called us and they're like, hey, we're putting the atrium under construction. So we're going to build a bunch of walls. So the restaurants will be open, but all the fun, cool looking waterfalls and rivers and everything in the center of the atrium is actually not going to be anything during your event. So that was a big time, we'll call it a letdown, to put it nicely, that, they decided they wanted to redo it 2 years into the hotel being like, we figured, hey, it's a new hotel. They're not going to do construction. They did. This one is the atrium will be open. It is open. And it's, like you said, really cool. Great views of the water. A super cool view of the monuments and stuff at night. So it's and during COVID, they actually redid all of the outlets. So the breakfast restaurant, the coffee place, they have a cool sports bar that has a bunch of kind of bar games and stuff like that. So really, really good kind of communal areas this year.
So are you going to be doing all of your kind of after hours events in the hotel, or are you going to be doing some offsites?
So iHeart will have an offsite party this year, to be announced where that is. But I believe every other event that is kind of going through us on the nights are going to be in various spaces around the hotel. So it'll be good for everyone who's staying there. They won't have to drive or Uber or anything else.
I see that there's a bowling alley in the hotel.
Yeah, it's called like duck pin bowling or something like that. So it's kind of like a shortened bowling game. But yeah, that bar in there has a bunch of bar games. It's fun for people.
I think for people that have never been to DC, having lived in Southern Maryland before, if you're planning to stay extra days, definitely stay the full weekend, because you can't see DC in even 3 days. You might get 1 or 2 museums knocked out on Friday and Saturday, but it's a monster city to be able to get through, and there's just so many venues, historical venues to go to is crazy. And good advice on that night walk on the monuments. I think that's and
you start looking at the different places, like how many Smithsonian museums are there? You're like, I'm gonna go to the Smithsonian, and then you're like, oh, which one? Like there's a lot more than one. So yeah, there's and all the the people of the what's the Nicolas Cage movie, The Night at the Museum. So like a lot of people want to go see the Night at the museums. Yeah, it's a cool town, and obviously the history and all that. But yeah, like you said, weekend before or weekend after, we're kind of right in the middle of both of them.
Yeah, or both. If you can, if you can afford to do both. So just politics aside, the rest of the city acts normal.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And great food venues too. A lot of seafood there in the harbor and so forth. So yeah, lots of great options.
So is there still more rooms available in the event kind of space for the hotel?
Yep, we do have some more rooms available. So we've essentially got the entire hotel for our group. Every year we kind of ask for more rooms. Denver, we sold out really early because it's one of their smaller hotels. This one's one of their bigger hotels, so we've got rooms. They're going to cut off our discounted rooms August 5th, which I think is like 2 weeks before the event. So that's about a week and a half if anyone hadn't booked their rooms yet. We do anticipate our rooms to sell out. It's just kind of a race of if it'll happen before that cutoff on August 5th or not. But yeah, it's nice rooms. We'll say the good thing that happened during COVID, a lot of hotels took advantage of that to redo a lot of rooms and a lot of common spaces and stuff. So what we're seeing right now is a lot of hotels are kind of our new feeling, even though they're not new hotels, because they took advantage of the downtime to do that. And this is one of those hotels that does have that new feeling to it, to the rooms and the common spaces.
So the question I always ask you, Dan, and I know you get jittery and don't want to answer completely, but what's your projected attendance this year?
It'll probably be right around where we were at last year, right around 3,000. That's kind of what we're looking at. I had mentioned earlier when we talked about the location, people in Denver, because not a lot of people lived there. Everyone was traveling in. So travel plans were made much sooner than if we're in a place where there's a lot of local people. We see the same thing in Los Angeles, very late registrations for our Los Angeles events because local people they'd rather pay more for a ticket but know that they're going to actually use the ticket, then register, a month or 2 months in advance and be like, I'm not actually sure I'm going to be able to make it. They'd rather just wait until the last minute and know they can make it.
And they don't necessarily need a hotel either. So, yeah.
Correct. So they don't need a hotel. They don't need to book travel. It's really just, can I be in this place on this day or these days? So that's the same thing. Anytime we're in a bigger city, that's what we see. So that's what we're seeing this year as well. But, when we plan for the events, we've kind of planned for this, a similar size to last year, especially last year was just so weird because, we were kind of in the middle of the dip of the industry, which I think we're seeing kind of pull up from that now. But last year we had a whole lot of exhibitors who bought booths and then either ran out of funding or completely went under before the event. So a lot of people like pulling out at the last minute or saying like, keep the booth. We don't want the money back, but we're not going to be there because our whole team got laid off, or because, we saw equipment manufacturers who bought booths and then said, hey, we cut our podcast product line, so we don't have anything to bring or show. Luckily, kind of just anecdotally, we have not seen any of that this year. We're seeing last minute booth bookings and that kind of thing. So it just kind of to me, the tone and the tenor and the excitement is more positive heading into this year than we had heading into and coming out of last year, really.
Well, let's hope the podcaster enthusiasm is at the same level. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to look at your sponsors and your presenting sponsors, because it's a little bit of a clue of maybe any kind of changes that are going on in the industry. So I just wanted to pull it up on the screen. It looks like iHeart's back, which has been a regular sponsor of the event. And then
I'll tell you something interesting. Just looking at this one, Rooster Teeth was a big presenting sponsor with us for several years, and they got acquired by CNN. So now we see CNN as kind of taken over Rooster Teeth's sponsorship, even though Rooster Teeth is still an entity. I guess when they, got acquired, that was something that kind of came over, was that sponsorship, and they've decided to do CNN audio as the sponsor. And CNN has been a sponsor in the past doing other things. They are this year as well. They're sponsoring morning yoga and our relaxation lounge, but this is kind of an additional, kind of a separate unit that took over that Rooster Teeth. So that's something interesting. We always see, kind of some newer companies coming in that people don't recognize. So to me, those are fun to get involved and see if they come back the next year, or if they, kind of spend all their money trying to make a big splash. The other thing we're seeing this year is just a lot of every sponsor wants boots on the ground. In the past, we've had sponsors who really are just like, hey, I'll take a banner over here, or I'll, play my video on this big screen over there. This year, a lot of what we're seeing is just people that want to host, want to have a booth to host meetings. We've introduced a concept called Industry Connect, which is kind of more of a networking area within the expo, where networks or brands can buy a what we call a nook, which is like a little meeting area within the expo floor, a little branded booth almost that's on the expo floor. We've seen a lot of interest in those, of people just wanting like dedicated meeting spaces, private meeting rooms. People are booking those more than they ever have before. So we're seeing a lot more interest in, we'll say, not just like waving the flag of a brand or a network, but the networks actually like want to be doing stuff while they're there, which to me is cool, because if I'm an attendee and I see, sponsor A is going to be there, like I anticipate being able to go there and meet them and talk to them and learn from them, or, do business with them or whatever. And if I show up and it's like, oh, they're a sponsor, but it's because they have a, sign on the wall. From the event production standpoint, that's great, because that's good money for us. Like, we'll sell sponsorships. But if I'm looking at it from the attendee standpoint, like if someone's, sponsoring, I actually want to be able to interact with them. And we're seeing the sponsors like share that sentiment more so than we've ever seen before. So I think that's cool.
Yeah, I'm surprised to see one sponsor up here that I'm a member of, and it's the Speaker Lab. So I think it's an interesting one that really kind of took me back. I wasn't thinking that I was going to see them as a presenting sponsor. I thought that's interesting. So
so
what's
them
the thinking with them, right?
I think and we've seen this before. It kind of comes and goes. They've been with us for several years now. But it's the idea of like, tangential to podcasters, right? Like we're gathering, thousands of these creators, these influencers, or people who want to be influencers, or who are using their voice and like either making money or trying to make money. and what other products or services might be of interest to those people outside of just podcast specific ones. So we've seen, for several years, we've seen, self-publishing type platforms where, these podcasters might want to write a book. So we've got a product or service to help them write their own book or become an author. So we've seen this kind of thing before. And, the fact that a lot of them come back year after year, I think it makes sense. And, the same way we talk about these creators who are, I've got an audio podcast, maybe I need to do video to grow, or like, it's that same type of mentality that it, kind of appeals to, is like,
Right.
what am I doing here? Or what can I do more? And we've certainly seen podcasters who, launch podcasts off the back of books as a traditional author. Or a traditional author might launch a podcast. So I could see like that, or a speaking career or whatever, kind of go that direction as well.
Kajabi is another one, community building platform. Yeah.
Community, and like I think they're hosting shows now, right? Todd, you would probably know better than me, but them, and we've always kind of seen networks have presence there. They're there to meet podcasters, kind of be a hub. They'll bring a lot of their hosts in and have their annual meetings with their hosts, or brands are there, ad buyers are there, so have those meetings. But to me, like I see a lot of sponsors and exhibitors who are with us for the first time, and I think that's cool, because if I'm an attendee who's been comes every year or comes most years to the event, getting to see the traditional products or services that I work with or I've worked with in the past, and being able to reconnect with them, but also discovering new tools or offerings is a cool way, as a cool thing to do as well.
So is this the first time that you've had Black Magic at the event?
It is. Speaking of kind of video and AI and all of that, they're actually sponsoring that emerging trends track. That was the video, and now is video and AI track. We've talked with them several years. Actually, we've all kind of had our experience at NAB and been at NAB. Kind of, I forget the name of the new side of the convention center, but when you walk on that long bridge that has the window that overlooks the street, Black Magic always buys the whole side of the Marriott hotel to like fully brand. So every time for like the past 3 or 4 years, and I walk by there, I'm like, got to get Black Magic, got to have Black Magic there.
Right.
And, so, and now with, this whole video thing that we spent a lot of the time talking about, they were like, hey, you're right, we do need to be there. So that's exciting.
Yeah, and I see NASA's there too. Is that the first time, or they've been there before?
It's the first time they've got a booth. So I don't know if that's kind of proximity to DC. I think the team is actually Florida based, if I remember correctly.
I would imagine they probably would.
But they've spoken several times. Last time we were in Orlando, they actually did a private tour for some of our attendees, where they took them down to, I guess, Cape Canaveral, and kind of showed them the facilities. But yeah, this is the first time they have a booth, so that'll be interesting. Always cool to see brands like that, or not brands, but like entities like that get involved and kind of invest in the space.
Daily Wire's back.
Yep, they were in DC with us as well.
That's great.
I'm sorry, in Denver with us as well.
Yeah, I know. I saw them there too.
Yeah.
We've kept Dan past the hour, Rob. So
yes, we have.
Well, I'm excited to come to DC, and should be a fun event. From a exhibitor perspective, we always, we hate to say it, but we always judge the success of a show based on floor traffic. So I noticed you guys aren't doing the beer hour this year. That was a successful thing in Denver.
Yes, it was successful for those who participated, and then we didn't get the buy-in that we wanted. We just thought hey, it was going to be this really cool thing. It could be something we come back with in the past. That was actually something that the Denver hotel specifically, it was we'll call it a menu item that they offered, that was the thing that they did. So we just kind of leaned into that. But it could make a comeback. Did it work for you all?
Yeah, it was fantastic. And of course, we had our secret weapon. We had our secret mugs that we brought. And
I still see those pictures whenever I'm looking through our sponsor pictures.
So it for us it worked out really, really well. You have nothing else. It's just again building the brand, getting people. You weren't doing business. People were just in line getting a drink, but they were there at the booth, and you could have a few words with people, that wanted to, but it wasn't really about having time to pitch. But it was just nice to see people, basically overlook your stuff and grab something if they wanted something. So just an extra opportunity to touch an exhibitor, not exhibitor, but an attendee. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good feedback. So yeah, fun. I know I'm late on myself as well, but fun. Not fun for us, but story about that is when we ordered the drinks for that, we were intending to order the number of pours, and every bottle had 3 pours. And then the hotel ordered for us the number of bottles. So they ordered 3 times as much of the beer that we thought we were. And the way their liquor licenses work, they're not able to like send that beer out with anyone. Like it's to be poured there or like basically taken back to the kitchen. So from our standpoint, that was a very unsuccessful, expensive activation. Yeah, like I said, about 3. It was already going to be like a loss leader, right? Like, hey, it was going to be a good thing. Keep people in there, give traffic to the exhibitors that participated. So anyways, that not saying that led us not to do it, but that was a learning experience for us to make sure all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted, because
make sure
anyone those bottles, anyone who who's done hotel events, like a bottle of beer, you're like, $3, $4, or $5 for a great one, maybe. At the hotel, those are like $15 or $20 bottles so numbers add up quick.
Yeah. Well, Dan, thanks. Yep. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you all there. And yeah, look forward to anyone who wants to learn more. It's 2024.podcastmovement.com. Tickets available, hotel rooms available. Yeah, we're just really looking forward to having, every year we try to have the best one yet, and this year will be no different. That's what we're aiming for.
Awesome. Yeah. Have a great evening. Thank you for coming on.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Dan. All right.
Things change, but still stay almost the same. It's kind of a rinse, wash, repeat.
Yeah. Well, that's the conference game, right? I mean, you have to have certain things that you kind of repeat, and then you just make slight modifications to things, and it makes it simpler.
It is interesting that the numbers are about the same.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's been that way for I don't know how many years now. It's probably 10 years.
Has the attendees topped out where? My experience at the London show, the experience at the London show was a little different. I would say there was more people that at PodFest and at Podcast Room that would stop to talk to you just on the whim. We learned in London that, when we go next year, we're going to incentivize people stopping at the booth. If you don't incentivize them to stop at the booth, when they're walking, they're not even looking at the booth. They're just focused on where they're going. And so, we're going to, when we go back to London, we'll incentivize people. You give them a reason to stop more than just, talk to us about the service offering. So.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I wonder if it's tapped out because the event is really more catered to the industry or the business side of podcasting, and not so much creators.
Well, I think we'll see. And now with PodFest making the shift and having some outside, I guess, money, I don't know. Have you found anything more about what's going on with PodFest?
Yeah, I can probably share something on the screen here. Actually, some of the details came from Pod News, so thank you, James, for that. But this is the kind of text of it here. If I can bring it up on the screen here, it's probably hard to read at that text level. So let me zoom in a little bit more on it. So you can kind of read here. It says here, PodFest has announced a substantial strategic investment from 2 partners. Nick Pavlidis joins as CEO of PodFest, and Dr. Glenn Vo will work on sponsorships and strategic relationships. Chris Kremitzos will remain with the team, focused on marketing and community building, which I think is Chris's strength, definitely.
So I
So
don't know either of these two people. Are they in the podcasting industry or are they
well, here, let's click on. Nope, nothing. Okay, this is his LinkedIn page here.
in?
Says CEO at Authority Ghostwriting and Ghostwriting School, the director of Smile and Grow Foundation, and managing partner and CEO of Podfest Multimedia Expo. So that's a recent addition to his background. So
Okay.
that's interesting. And then Dr. Glenn Vo, let's look at his profile. I guess he's professionally a dentist and is a board member and he's an industry connector and a book publisher. So I'm
So
not sure.
interesting that these two have invested.
Yeah.
It's very, very curious.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Definitely. Yeah. So, I wish Chris the most luck in this. And I know that I'm working with him a little bit on the Podcast Hall of Fame that's going to come up here soon. So,
Yeah.
so that's coming. So get out of this.
And pretty quiet on the Podcast Hall of Fame front.
Yeah, it has. I'm trying to get things ramped up again around it. So I think there should be some more information coming out about it here soon.
Okay.
So that's
Because it's probably about time to start doing selection process.
exactly, and that's exactly the stage that I'm at of trying to get that going again. So, did we want to talk about Spotify a little bit here? Daniel Elk on podcasts in Spotify. There's some quotes in here that he made.
Well, again, I think, when you control the narrative, control the platform, you can say whatever the hell you want. And
Yeah.
I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure they've made video engagement very high
Yep.
in their platform. So if you surface video before you surface audio, of course you're going to see greater engagement on video than you will in audio. So, I take a tongue in cheek, it's just like their earnings report, they didn't have a full earnings report in AKA their adjusted EBITDA, which I always thought is comical. Did they leave some expenses out or what did they do?
Right.
But I don't, this is the narrative again. Again, how many video podcasts are actually seeing success? And that's something you're going to continue to ask podcasters. Or is it a select segment of videos? With Rogan doing video, I'm sure people are watching Rogan on there with video heavy.
I know I do. So yeah. That's about the only thing I consume on Spotify.
I don't listen to his video. I just, matter of fact, I'm not subscribed to Rogan. I listen to snippets. So there was something
that's also on YouTube as well as his full shows are over there now too. So
and then there was some more to this statement that he made later that James.
Well, I don't think we actually mentioned what his statement was. It shows on the screen, but it says where we have video podcasts, engagement is even higher than what we have seen when it's audio only. So he's making the statement is that the engagement and the content is even higher with the video than it is with the audio.
Okay, so engagement means more views or more listener interactions.
I'm not really sure in specificness what that means. Right. Yeah.
So if you're uploading video to other platforms, you take most of your costs already, so it makes sense for us to. So the problem is then you again extra work instead of just taking podcasts.
Oh, it is extra, right? Agreed. Yeah. No, it is extra work.
I don't know how many podcasters are going to be wanting to upload to their host, then upload to YouTube, and then upload to Spotify.
Yeah, it takes time because there's no centralized pathway like the audio has.
No.
That can funnel that content into multiple platforms. So that's the disadvantage, right?
Yeah, there is a time, and even on Apple, on YouTube, you can get your audio over there, but you can't get your video. But his answer is, for instance, longer form content tends to do really well on Spotify and video. Well, who has longer form content and video on Spotify? Rogan, with 3-hour programs. So, who else is doing long format?
Well, if you're uploading the same content that you're uploading to YouTube, chances are it's probably going to be long form video content. So I would imagine that's most of what Spotify has is probably longer form. Of course, it depends on what you consider to be long form. Is it 10 minutes or is it, an hour?
There's something very interesting. He says Spotify is a lean back history as a platform. Do we want to lean back? Podcasting is a lean in, not a lean back.
Well, that's where this concept of playlists comes from, right? And it's the same thing that's been going on YouTube too, is that there is automation that's built into the platform. If you don't select another video right away, it'll start playing whatever it wants to start playing.
Whatever it wants,
which tends to be more like television to some degree, right?
Yeah, I don't let YouTube do that, but I'm sure a lot of people do.
Yeah. So I think that Spotify clearly is either seeing, good engagement with video or they're trying to create it here a little bit more by putting out PR that is spinning it to look like it's doing well on the platform, right?
Exactly.
Because I'm sure they want to grow engagement, right? Which is typically code for time spent listening or viewing in this case.
Well, again, it's whatever definition they want, and they don't define it. They don't say that we're seeing 5 times more listener hours than they just say engagement. They really don't define it. So again, it's a very vague.
Right. It could be like 1% more as far as we know.
Right. Very vague. So again, I'm the doubting Thomas here. So I'm,
They're also saying, say they'll see higher engagement, thereby higher monetization. If I didn't click on that right. Yeah, right here.
In other words, they'll throw more ads at it.
Yeah. So that means that tells me that that it's time spent viewing. Now that's a metric that's very important to YouTube too.
But if you think about higher monetization with video versus audio, then that tells you that they're really not paying podcasters very much money for their audio monetization, which typically has been 4 to 5 times or even 6 times as higher as what a YouTube CPM would be. If you're thinking about getting a $25 or $30 CPM on audio and they say that they're getting higher monetization on video, and video has always been a much lower, that just tells you they're not paying very much on these audio listens.
Well, I mean, a lot of the monetization, I would imagine, that's going through Spotify is coming from, programmatic and
so it's
dynamic ad insertion technology that's being put into the content outside of Spotify. Right?
Having not watched any video on Spotify, and I don't have a subscription over there, so
But if it's hosted on Spotify, then that's where the monetization would come from, is through Spotify, right?
Well, it has to be.
Mostly. I guess you could embed.
There's no video that's not
into
hosted.
the video.
Oh,
right.
You could, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you could take the same ads that you're doing host reads that you're putting into YouTube.
I'm sure it is.
Is that you're putting into Spotify. So
But then again, people don't like that because then it's baked in and you can't replace the video.
Right.
And the same thing with YouTube.
Yeah.
And as where YouTube is now, and I don't care about whatever your stance is on guns, but on YouTube right now, they just implemented a do not monetize. So people that have been on YouTube for years doing sportsman shows, anything that has a GUN in it, a gun in it, no longer eligible for monetization. So, now these folks have built their empire on a basket of eggs, And now they're just, they're laying in a puddle of yolk because YouTube has said, okay, we're not paying you no more.
Right.
And where do they go? They go to Rumble. Okay, they go to Rumble, but are they going to make as much money on Rumble as they were making on YouTube? I think this is just a wake up call here that, again, you have to be careful on where you're building your empire and where
Right.
you put your listeners at. Based on these models, there's no way I would be promoting as a podcaster, having my listeners listen on Spotify, unless I was
Right.
on a pass through and I could monetize myself. But if you submitted your show on Spotify manually, you can't change your ads. They're cached.
Right.
So the average podcaster doesn't know this.
Mhm.
So people like us just have to continue to at least try to educate folks.
Yes, I noticed on Pod News a day or so ago that it was put out that I guess Spotify's Megaphone or wait a minute. No,
Yeah,
no.
Megaphone's going to return to IAB. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also
Spotify.
it looked like Captivate is the first podcast host to achieve IAB v2.2 certification.
Yeah, we just started ours last week.
Okay.
So, in matter of fact, it's just we've been waiting. The auditors have been busy, obviously, with other companies. So, I'm sure there's a number of folks in line, but I think we've been waiting about 2 months to get started on the. We applied as soon as 2.2 came out, whatever that date was.
Mhm. So is the 2.2 certification of the IAB podcast metric standard, is that the first one to support the IPv6?
No,
Fully?
IPv6 has been in there.
It has.
So it all depends on if you're supporting IPv6.
Got it.
We're
Got it.
still doing only IPv4, and
Mhm.
the IPv6 gets, I don't know, Amazon does some sort of a conversion, and it shows up as an IPv4.
And I
But
also noticed
or
that
maybe it doesn't. Maybe just it's all served IPv4, but we don't have IPv6 turned on.
I also saw that there was a listing in here for Blueberry.
Yeah,
Launched, AI generated clip highlights.
yeah.
So tell us about that a little bit. Yeah.
It's basically a poor man's version of Headliner.
Got it. So is
Yeah.
this a
AT&T has announced a data breach impacting nearly all of its wireless.
yeah, that's an example of it.
Yeah. And it's either, vertical or horizontal, and it has a waveform, and we've got a bunch of templates people can pick from, and they can pick their colors. That was actually one of the test clips. I wasn't even too worried about the color matchup. So
Mhm.
James asked for a sample, and I just threw one up there. So I'm not too visually inclined, so I'm sure that I could have picked better colors.
Well, it's the functionality that you were trying to demonstrate, not
Yeah,
the
yeah,
creative talent, right?
yeah. And I guess the main thing too is, now we've got an audio clip generator, we've got a video clip generator, we've got the social post creator, we have the newsletter, we've got the production tools. So we basically have everything, and from end to end. Next month in August, we're going to give every one of our hosting customers a free month access to what we call our Thrive package, which includes the AI. So it's available for all of our customers for $10 a month,
Mm,
but includes a whole bunch of other stuff. The Thrive package is a series of features like pre-roll advertising and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So, but in August, everyone's going to get a free month of Thrive to be able to play with. We gave everyone some free trials, but we were going to give the whole stack a free month of unlimited usage.
awesome. All right. Well,
Yeah.
keep piling on those AI features, right?
Yeah. Some of the stuff is not easy too. I've got a list of stuff, and, starting to do AI on our analytics stuff. It's the key really boils down to is, what is the question you're trying to answer? You can come up with all kinds of ideas, but is it useful to the
Mhm.
podcaster to be able to say, okay, here is a analysis of your show that I can reproduce every single day of the week to give you similar results based upon the performance of an episode, what can I tell you from that? So, where we're looking now and where AI is going to help in the statistics side and stuff, basic information, actual information we can give. And we got some ideas there, and it's kind of one thing that AI is good at is actually using database data. It's really, really, really good at using database data.
Yeah.
And the math comes out pretty close 99% of the time.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see where it leads, but that's probably where we're headed next.
So I also wanted to talk quickly about what we also saw in Pod News. This came out today, I believe, and I guess the CEO of was it Audio Boom, Stuart Last, said that the changes in Apple's iOS 17 update cost them $9 million or 9 million pounds. I'm
Wow.
not sure which one that is, but and then Acast put the iOS 17 update costs at 7.2 million.
Well, here's the thing. Those weren't real listeners to begin with. So why
Right.
is it the story that you've capitalized on is we have more accurate data now,
Right.
and we've raised CPMs accordingly because the content was more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
There's two ways to look at this. Is the glass half full, or is it I,
Yeah, I guess if you look at it from that perspective, Todd, it doesn't. It's almost like that money wasn't really earned, right?
no, it wasn't. It wasn't earned.
Right. Which is
And,
one of
and
those
the,
things that we were trying to avoid by the standardization with the IAB metrics, right? Was
well,
trying to
again,
have accuracy.
it's
Right.
under qualification of the media.
Right.
So, you know, again, Blueberry did not see this big hit like others did because we have a fundamentally different way of doing stats. Yeah, we
Mhm.
saw a few percentage points because of just the way some of the changes Apple made were
Right.
definite, but we weren't seeing this impact of all these repeated retry of downloads
Mhm.
that was happening every day, every day, every day, every day, every day.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at um, the new IAB spec, there's a section in there talking about anomalies and having to have an anomaly. What does that mean? What's an anomaly? Well, you can kind of let your imagination run. Is that um, the anomaly could have been why was Apple coming? Why didn't people account and reduce the number of downloads that they were billing for when they saw this behavior, which was very evident that the
Mhm.
Apple was trying to read down 40 files every day and failing, and it again goes back again to people about crucified me when I suggested that the 1 minute a minimum audio is not enough to qualify a download.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
This is really a little bit of a condemnation of the IAB metric standard too, right?
well, again, you're getting 26, 27, 30 companies that are trying to agree on stuff. And when you make
Right.
when Todd comes in and says we should change the minimum qualification from 1 minute to another number, well, immediately what they do is in their head they're doing the math on how much is that going
Right.
to cost them in
Right.
advertising revenue.
And we've seen it right here, what it can cost, right?
Right.
And it's significant. I mean,
And
those
meanwhile,
aren't small numbers.
what they've done is that means their revenue, their ROI that they were having on performance is, what percentage of revenue was that? Was that 10%? So that means that their podcasts were performing 10% better than,
Yeah.
whatever that percentage drop is. That means the ROI, if they'd have billed accordingly and then they had removed those downloads, then the performance would have been much higher. So you should have been able to go back to the advertiser and say, hey, since this is, we've been performing well and you've been happy paying at 22, and now we're counting less, but we have the same performance. Give me 24.20.
Right.
There should have been, but that's never happened. And anytime these adjustments have happened throughout every time there's been a haircut taken, there's been no adjustment to the CPM. The only people that have won are the advertisers because we can't get out of our own damn way.
So Todd, why do you think that these companies put this information out? Is it because that their profit
They're crying like babies
and revenues didn't hit their projections? Is that
maybe that was their excuse? But in all honesty, it's because they weren't doing good due diligence and weren't keeping an eye on the ball on their metric system. I have no sympathy.
Yeah. So for Audio Boom, in H1 2024 results, it shows that the second quarter revenue was up 7% in total, and adjusted earnings per share profit was, or not per share, but earnings was $750,000. So what they're saying here potentially is that that profit could have been what, $9 million more.
Well,
So that's kind of what they're implying there.
boo-hoo.
Right.
You've been measuring wrong. You haven't taken into account. There was some groups that saw this early on, and they took those numbers out of billing.
So does this mean that
there was IEB meetings where this was discussed? This was known that there was an issue. This was no surprise to nobody.
You also notice that Audio Boom didn't put out who they're hosting their shows with.
Well, I don't think they're hosting with Audio Boom. I think they do their own hosting.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's their own fault.
Yeah. So how many other companies had huge hits like this on their bottom lines that maybe we didn't hear about?
I know, but I can't say.
iHeart, Spotify.
I can't say because some people talked about. I know which companies that brought it up during the IEB meetings and said there's an issue here. They said it to the group. There's 60 people on a call.
Yeah.
So this was a known issue.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. Right.
And the people that caught it removed those numbers, and they haven't been in the news talking about how they lost $9 million.
Yeah, because it's possible some of those other companies could have lost more. These aren't the biggest companies in the industry.
Lose money. They just didn't bill for the inflated downloads. They knew they were junk.
Yeah, because these two companies are not the biggest ones in the industry.
So they took in the other, and again I can't say, but they did the responsible thing.
Yeah. But it does raise the question about the IEB metric standards too.
It wasn't an IEB issue. It was purely they saw the inflation, they saw what was happening in the log files, and they didn't adjust for it, or they weren't looking at the data, or they stuck their head in the sand saying, hey, it qualifies, we're going to bill for it.
Yeah.
Again, if you've been told that there is an issue, that there is an activity going on, then of course a percentage of that drop was not because of the activity. There, percentage, the folks that probably lost the biggest amount of money was still billing against those repeated tries to download episodes day after day after day that they were having failed downloads. That is where the majority, probably the money, was lost. The simple fact of them changing the way the iOS 17 actually downloads, and how many episodes it downloads on back media, that was not the majority of the haircut. The majority of the haircut come from the activity that the app was failing at. So yes, everyone took 3-4%, whatever it was, just in the iOS 17 change that happened because of the way it basically has set up that does downloads. But again, the majority of this haircut that this loss of money was more than likely, and I can't speak for them, they'd have to speak for themselves, was this, again, trying to re-download media that was old.
Yeah, I see in an article, Brian Moffat, the chief operating officer for National Public Media, is quoted as saying that the daily shows from National Public Radio saw a decline around 10% in monthly downloads. But for longer shows published on other cadences, the decline was upwards of 30%. Those are pretty big numbers.
Well, again,
Says Odyssey Podcast Network showed a 47% decline. Cumulus showed 60% decline.
I think that's all part of a fault of their metrics people not having an eye on the ball.
Yeah. Interesting.
So,
yeah.
and what Apple did, in my opinion, was the right thing. Like it or not.
Yeah. Caught
It's
the
not going to win me any friends, but
industry off guard here. It says
did not catch the industry off guard. They knew changes were coming.
okay.
Well, they knew there was an issue with the inflated downloads.
It says here, PodTrack data showed and suggested an average of a 15% drop in their numbers for large shows. So anyway, it's what it is.
It is what it is.
The haircuts continue.
That's right. And yet, no increase in CPMs.
Yes. Yeah.
Could it be that the media buyers already know what the ROI performance is and adjust CPMs vendor for vendor?
I mean, if you're going to apply reasoning and logic, as the numbers get more refined and more focused and more accurate, you would think that the CPMs would go up, right?
Well, or did the media buyers already have a formula they applied against each vendor? When you're running 20 campaigns across 20 different companies, you know what your ROI should be. And if the ROI is a 10% or 8% disparity between vendors, then guess what you do? You offer the vendor that's not performing as well, you give them a 10% cut in CPMs. So the vendors are not stupid. They know where performance is at on average. I know the company out of Houston. I know they had matter of fact, I saw their spreadsheet before that had everyone listed and the discount they applied.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're long here. So
yeah,
Rob, because of my audio cutout, I'm definitely going to need you to send me the audio file as soon as possible.
Okay.
Yeah,
it takes time to get it exported as a local recording, so that's what slows me down. So I wanted to make a quick correction to something that I said in a past episode here. I had mentioned that the active number of shows that we were seeing on the 30-day kind of breakout at the podcast index kind of stats area. I think I mentioned 50 to 60% decline in the active podcasts that we're showing in there, and that was not correct. The actual number that I did some research on over a 28-month period from like this week back 28 months showed an overall decline over the 28-month period back to the middle of 2022 as about 24.8% decline in active podcasts.
Were we able to were we able to get a number on 60 and 90 days?
No.
Yeah, because I think where I saw the biggest drop was that 60-day or 90-day figure. I can't remember whatever that lasts, but it is good to know that it was only 24%.
Yeah,
When you look
James came back. James Cridlin is the one that sent me this data, but
Yeah.
but he shared with me that over the last 18 months, that the decline is around 6%.
so the
So
biggest
shared.
the biggest percent of decline happened in the first 6 months.
Prior to that, right?
And so what was the start date that you're talking about? July of 22? Is that what you're looking at?
The number that I shared, let's see here if I have it in front of me. It was like March of 2022.
Yeah, March of 2022.
Which would have put it 28 months back.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we saw a peak of like this is the 30-day active shows.
Yeah.
A peak of around, I think, 416,000 shows. And I think as of this week, it was like 321,000
Yeah.
shows.
So if that was about the time COVID was getting over.
Yeah, it was toward the end of the COVID thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So I can't remember when we officially kind of came out of COVID and things opened back up where people could resume life, but I think that's about right, isn't it?
Well, I mean, based on what the data, I had to go back and actually look at the numbers through the Internet Archive or the Wayback Machine,
Oh,
because there wasn't access that James had to the index going back that far.
Prior to that.
Right.
Well, still a significant drop, and the majority of that happening the first 6 months since March of 22 makes sense because people were getting back to life and stopped doing their double shows. So the drop between essentially, and James's data went back 2 years to July.
James went back 18 months. So
went back 18 months. So
Right.
the 18-month figure is 6%.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
But the
That's more-
28-month was 24%.
24%. So that's a little more palatable, but it's still flat. It's not.
Yeah, it's certainly not going up.
Yeah, well, and there's little.
Yeah, it
It's
goes
like-
up and down
up and down.
on the cycles. But if you look at the actual newsletter that
Yeah.
James even puts out on a daily basis, that active show number, most of the time I see it as down like 1% or
Yeah,
1.8% or something like that.
great time to be a podcaster.
Yeah. There's more upside opportunity, right? Is that the
Right.
thought, Todd? Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
All right. I'm Todd at blueberry.com, at Geek News on Twitter. You can reach me on Mastodon at geeknews@geeknews.chat.
Yeah, and I'm on X as well at Rob Greenlee, and my email address is rob.greenlee@gmail.com. Reach out if you want to, and I also have a YouTube channel as well that you may be watching this program on. So definitely reach out and share whatever you want. We're always open to getting tips about things.
Or being corrected when we're wrong.
Right, we're definitely open to that as well. Yes.
But a 24% drop over 28 months is a significant decline in
In
that is
active 30-day shows, right?
people saying that that's not doomsday for a business. To lose 24% that's significant.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't 50%, which
Right.
I had in my mind was almost catastrophic. So
24% from if I lost 24% of my business, that's catastrophic.
yeah, well,
That means there's,
well,
regardless.
yeah, and I also tracked that Pod News kind of show flow chart that James has too. I don't know if were you seeing shows moving between platforms?
Yeah.
And it's always interesting looking at that to see where the flows,
See who's going where.
where who's losing customers and who's gaining customers.
And
So
here's the thing: so few people actually move. It's really a minuscule number.
yeah, it is. It's usually each time that I go look at it, it's like a monthly thing, and it's like Lipson loses like 8 people, and
Right.
Blueberry gains 3 or something like
Or
that.
loses,
Right?
or loses 5 or whatever.
Yeah, right. It could go either way.
And
Right.
we've lost some that went away for a couple of weeks, then come back. That's
Yeah, that can happen. Yeah, I've seen that happen.
grass is not always greener on the other side of
Yeah,
the fence.
exactly. I thought it was going to be better over there, but they didn't follow up with their email, so I'm moving back. Right. All right,
All right,
Todd.
Rob.
Okay.
Hey, everyone, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next week. And
Yep.
I'm back stateside, so we'll be back at 3 p.m. Eastern next week.
31st? On the
Yeah.
31st, right? Yeah.
Yeah, back to normal
Okay.
showtime.
All right. Sounds terrific.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.